I was born the daughter of a nobleman. Once upon a time, that meant something. I remember the scent of rose gardens in spring, the sound of music from our drawing room, and my father's hand brushing mine as he taught me to waltz. But fairy tales lie. After my father's death, our estate didn't become a haven. It became a cage. Lady Rowena, his widow, and my stepmother, saw to that. She married my father for status and stayed for his fortune. The moment he was buried, she stripped our house of everything that belonged to me and declared me unfit to be seen by society. I was told I wasn't worthy of the Dorn's name anymore. Just a lira. No title. No rights. No room of my own. I slept in the servants' attic and worked harder than the maids. Clarice, her daughter, made sure of it. Clarice had the beauty of a portrait and the heart of a dagger. She sneered when I passed in the halls, smeared ash on the gowns I tried to mend, and laughed when I flinched. But worse than her cruelty was how the world adored her. With her mother's money and my father's name, she was presented at court as a rising jewel. And now, all she wanted was Prince Thorian. The kingdom buzzed with gossip. The prince had returned from his travels, and he was to find a bride at the grand masquerade ball. An age-old tradition to ensure he chose a woman based on presence, not title. Any lady of noble bearing could attend, masked and anonymous, to dance beneath the chandeliers and try her fate. But not me. Lady Rowena made sure I was banned from every list. She told the palace I was a ward too sick to attend, a poor cousin taken in out of pity. Still, I listened. I listened as Clarice shrieked at tailors and sniffed perfumes. I watched her twirl in front of the mirror in her custom silver gown, claiming that the prince would fall for her the moment he saw her. He'd never even spoken to her, but that didn't matter. She had decided. And Lady Rowena had a plan. She would present Clarice as a mystery. Not say her name, not make her debut, just let the prince become intrigued by the woman in the silver dress. A mask of allure. Lies, draped in lace. They didn't know I had eyes. And ears. And a mind that remembered how to sew. The night before the ball, I crept into the old wing of the estate where my mother's things had been locked away. Most of her dresses had been sold, but a seamstress friend I'd helped once owed me a favor. Together, we worked in secret for weeks, using scraps, silks from forgotten trunks, old pearls hidden in bookshelves. I pieced together a gown in midnight blue, with soft silver embroidery, unlike anything Clarice would wear. A real mask, not just the kind for a ball, but a second skin. Something that turned me from servant to stranger. I told no one. Not even the kind old gardener who slipped me apples when I missed meals. That night, as Lady Rowena's carriage rolled away with Clarice beaming behind the glass, I slipped out through the kitchen doors with nothing but a borrowed cloak and a wish I didn't dare speak. The palace gates were open to masked guests. They didn't question my name. My heart pounded as I stepped onto the marble floor beneath golden arches and chandeliers that glowed like sunlight. I'd never seen such grandeur up close. I nearly turned back. But then the music began. I walked slowly. Deliberately. Alone. Men turned to look, women whispered, but I kept moving. Until I saw him. Prince Thorian didn't stand on a dais or wait in a throne. He walked among the crowd like he belonged nowhere and everywhere. His posture was sharp, suit immaculate, but his expression, detached. Bored, almost. Until his gaze fell on me. He approached without a word, extended a hand, and I placed mine in his. We danced. His grip was strong but not possessive. His step steady but light. And when he spoke, his voice wasn't lofty or commanding. It was curious. Who are you? No one. No one would wear a dress like that. I laughed. The sound shocked even me. And so did his smile. We didn't speak of titles or wealth or ambition. We spoke of storms and books and the feeling of being watched even when no one's looking. He said he hated masks, despite the irony. I said sometimes they're the only way to be seen. When the final bell of midnight echoed, I felt something I hadn't in years, free. I ran before he could ask my name. Before I said too much. Before I became real. But I left something behind, not a shoe, not a clue. A memory. One he wouldn't let go of. Back at the estate, I snuck in while Clarice snored in her perfumed sheets. Lady Rowena would never suspect I had been there. But I couldn't sleep. My heart was no longer mine. And I knew something had changed. The prince was looking for the masked girl. And I was about to meet him again. But not the way anyone expected. A week after the ball, the palace announced that the prince was launching a quiet search. He had danced only once that night, and now he wanted the mystery woman to come forward. But no name had been given. No clue left behind. Only the memory of a girl in midnight blue with sharp words and soft laughter. Court ladies scrambled to recreate the look. Dressmakers were flooded with orders for silver embroidery. Nobles sent their daughters to stroll near the palace gardens, hoping to be spotted. But nothing worked. The prince did not appear at any public functions. Whispers said he was refusing all invitations. That he'd turned away even the daughter of a duke. That he was obsessed. And Clarice? She was livid. She had expected a summons. Instead, she received silence. He's probably playing hard to get, she said one morning over honeyed tea, flinging the letter opener at the wall. Men like to chase. Lady Rowena, ever composed, merely tilted her head. Then we give him something to chase. That night, Clarice asked me to polish her shoes until they gleamed, fix the hem of a second silver dress, and iron silk gloves she had never worn before. She didn't say where she was going, but I could guess. I kept my head down and my expression blank, but inside, my heart twisted with dread. If she pretended to be the masked girl, and the prince believed her, then everything would be lost. Not just my night, but the rare, strange feeling that someone had seen me. Really seen me. The next morning, I fled to the woods. It was the only place no one followed. The trees didn't care who I was. The birds didn't know what I had done. There, I could be a Lyra without shame. I sat beneath the old oak by the stream, running my fingers through the cold water, and tried to forget. Then I heard the crunch of leaves. I spun around, startled. A figure stood in the clearing, dressed simply, no crown, no guards, just a cloak and riding boots dusted with mud. I recognized him instantly. Prince Thorian. I scrambled to rise, but he held out a hand. Don't, he said. I'm not here for ceremony. I froze, unsure if I should run or bow. My hair was tangled, my apron stained with earth, and my hands still smelled faintly of ash soap. There was no mask to hide behind this time. But he didn't flinch. I come here when I need quiet, he added, stepping closer. You're not trespassing, are you? No, I said. At least, I didn't think I was. He smiled. It was smaller than before. Tired. But real. Good. Then I won't feel guilty for interrupting. He sat beside me without waiting for permission, gazing at the stream as if it held answers. I didn't know what to say. If I acted too familiar, he'd suspect. Too cold, and he'd leave. So I said nothing. Just sat. I'm Thorian, he said after a moment. I blinked. I know. His lips quirked. That obvious? Only a little. He laughed. It echoed through the trees like wind through leaves. And you are? Elira. The truth came out before I could stop it. But I didn't give a surname. Just enough. Elira, he repeated, testing the sound. It suits you. That moment was the start of something I didn't expect. We met in the woods again 3 days later. Then again the week after that. I never asked him about the ball, and he never mentioned the masked girl. It was like we both agreed, without saying, that whoever we were in that ballroom didn't matter here. He told me about his travels, about the pressure to marry, about the loneliness of being admired by everyone and known by no one. I told him about plants, about how certain herbs bloom even in bad soil, about the cat that slept in our kitchen when no one was looking. I didn't speak of my past. Or my stepmother. Or the attic where I slept. But I didn't need to. He watched me closely. As if he was trying to match this girl, mud on her skirt, twigs in her hair, to someone he already knew. I started to worry he would figure it out. But I also started to hope he would. And that terrified me. Because what if he knew, and didn't care? Worse, what if he did care, but only for the mask? The lie? One evening, just as the sun dipped below the trees, he brought me a book. A collection of stories written by foreign poets. He said it reminded him of me. Because it's unreadable? I joked. No, he said, serious. Because it doesn't pretend to be simple. He didn't try to touch me. He didn't press for more. He just handed me the book and told me he'd see me soon. But someone else had been watching. Clarice. The very next day, she burst into my room before dawn, shrieking. My gown from the masquerade had been found. Torn from its hiding place, dragged through soot. My mask was in pieces. She didn't say how she knew. But I saw it in her eyes. You think you can steal him from me? She hissed. A servant girl? I didn't answer. She slapped me hard enough to split my lip. Lady Rowena entered moments later, calm as ever. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She simply told the guards to lock me in the attic. No visitors. No food. No fire. You were born in silk, and yet you cling to rags, she murmured as the door closed behind her. Now rot in them. So I did. For 3 days. But they forgot one thing. I had danced with a prince. And he hadn't seen a servant. He had seen me. And if I ever got out, I would make sure they remembered it. They locked me in the attic with nothing but a moth-eaten blanket and a broken lantern. The air was thick with dust, the kind that choked your breath and clung to your skin. At night, I lay awake listening to the house creak beneath their laughter. During the day, I watched the light move across the cracks in the wooden walls. No one came. Not the cook, not the gardener, not even the old seamstress. Lady Rowena made sure my existence was erased. But she couldn't erase what had already happened. I clung to that memory like a lifeline. The prince's voice in the woods. The way he said my name. The book in my hands, still tucked beneath my apron when they dragged me here. They hadn't searched me properly. That small mercy was enough to keep me sane. On the 4th day, the door creaked open. I sat up, expecting Clarice's smug face or Rowena's cold commands. Instead, it was Ansel, the gardener. I waited until no one was watching, he whispered, eyes darting around. She says you're not to be fed, but I can't stand by. He handed me a crust of bread and a flask of water, then glanced toward the window. They've been busy at the palace. The prince is refusing all formal introductions. Word is he's still searching. I didn't respond. Just gripped the bread with trembling fingers and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded and left. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to waste away in an attic. I wasn't going to let them win. The world had already forgotten me once. I wouldn't let it happen again. When Ansel returned 2 nights later, I was ready. "I need to get out," I said. "Just one night. Can you help?" He hesitated, then nodded. "There's a festival in 3 days. Everyone will be watching Clarice. They've arranged for her to present herself publicly, wearing silver." Of course they had. Clarice was going to pretend she was the masked girl. But I still had the truth. And something more powerful, his attention. That night, while the house slept, Ansel led me through a hidden passage to the stables. I wore a borrowed cloak and old boots. I didn't have my gown anymore, but I had something better. I had his book. And I had my story. The festival was held in the town square. Lanterns swayed from strings overhead. Musicians played under ivy-covered arches. Crowds gathered, jostling for a glimpse of the prince. I stayed in the shadows, watching. Clarice arrived on a gilded cart, wearing a near-exact copy of the dress I had made. Silver silk. Glittering mask. Hair curled into perfection. The crowd gasped. The court watched. Anthorian? He didn't move. He stood still as she approached, her every step rehearsed. She dipped into a curtsy, her voice like syrup. "My prince. We meet again." He said nothing. Not a smile. Not a word. Only a pause. Then finally, "Do we?" Clarice blinked. "You danced with me, remember?" He looked her up and down. "I remember a woman who challenged me, who laughed at me. You look like her. But you don't speak like her." She flinched, just barely. "The mask changes things." "Not that much." He turned away. The crowd murmured. Lady Rowena swept in, grasping her daughter's arm, whispering furiously. Clarice smiled again, but it faltered. I slipped away into the edge of the crowd, heart pounding. He didn't believe her. He knew it wasn't her. And still, he hadn't found me. That night, I returned to the woods. Not as a girl hiding from the world, but as a woman with nothing to lose. I waited by the stream, the moon casting silver ripples across the water. And he came. He always did. He sat beside me without speaking, his jaw tense. "She's not the one," he said finally. I didn't answer. I knew at the moment she opened her mouth. She wanted me to believe she was mysterious, but she couldn't even fake her curiosity. Still, I was silent. "You haven't asked me about the ball," he said softly. I looked at him. Would it matter if I did? He studied me. No, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a silver ribbon. Torn. Frayed. The edge of my mask. "I found this outside the palace gates that night. I've been carrying it ever since." I stared at it. At him. My pulse hammered in my throat. He looked back at me. "You remind me of her." A pause. But not because of your face. I swallowed. Then what? Because when you speak, I feel like I've finally stopped performing. I should have told him then. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to finish what I started. I needed to show the world who Clarice really was. I needed to make Lady Rowena regret the day she turned me into a servant. And when I did, I would not be wearing a mask. The next morning, Lady Rowena announced it with smug delight. Clarice was to be presented at court, again. A private audience with the king and queen had been arranged. According to her, Prince Thorian had simply been overwhelmed at the festival and needed time to see clearly. Clarice paraded through the manor with renewed purpose, issuing orders and screeching for new shoes. I wasn't allowed out of the attic now, not even to scrub the floors. But I didn't need to see them to know what was happening. They were grasping at the last threads of control. And I was ready to cut them loose. Ansel had kept me informed. After the festival, rumors began spreading, quiet, but persistent. The masked girl hadn't spoken like a trained lady. She hadn't curtsied right. She'd spoken too freely, too boldly. The nobles were whispering. Some said she might have been a commoner. Others, a lost noble in hiding. But the court wasn't impressed by Clarice's show. The queen herself had reportedly raised a brow and asked if her voice had changed since the ball. Clarice, in desperation, began rewriting the truth. She told anyone who'd listen that her nerves had overtaken her. That she'd fallen ill. That she had simply forgotten how to speak in the prince's presence because of her love. I could practically hear her lies bleeding into the walls of the house. But something shifted the moment she caught me watching from the attic window. Her eyes narrowed. She froze. Then she smiled. It was the kind of smile that says, I know exactly what you're doing. And I'm going to destroy you first. Later that night, the door to the attic slammed open. Clarice stood there with a torch and a scroll in hand. Behind her, 2 guards waited. She shoved the paper into my chest. Confess, she said. Now. I looked down. It was a statement. A false one. It claimed I had stolen one of Clarice's gowns. That I had broken into her chamber and impersonated her at the masquerade to shame her in front of the prince. It was written in the neat, flowing script of Lady Rowena. If you sign it, we'll let you stay, Clarice said, lips curling. As a kitchen maid, maybe. No more garden escapes. No more attic windows. But you'll eat. You'll breathe. I looked up slowly. And if I don't? Then you'll be handed over to the city guard for fraud and treason. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at her until her smugness cracked. She stepped forward and whispered, You think you can win? That he'll care about some servant girl when he finds out. He won't. He'll pity you. Or worse, he'll forget you. You're nothing, Elira. You were nothing before the ball, and you'll be nothing after. That's when I smiled. Because for the first time I didn't care what she thought. I didn't need her name. I had my own. And I was done being quiet. The next day, Ansel delivered a message to the palace. Not from me, but from my father. From before he died. An old letter he had written to a friend at court, confirming the contents of his will. That I, Elira Dorn, was his only heir. That Lady Rowena was guardian of the estate only until I came of age. I had come of age 3 years ago. Rowena had hidden the document. Lied to the council. Covered it up and locked me away before anyone could challenge her. But now it was in the hands of the royal record keeper. And Prince Thorian himself was looking into the matter. When the summons arrived 3 days later, Lady Rowena went pale. It wasn't for Clarice. It was for her. A quiet audience with the royal treasury to discuss the rightful heir of Lord Dorn's estate. She tried to send Clarice in her place. The guards refused. They knew. Clarice screamed at the footmen. She shrieked at the servants. She threw an entire vase at my attic door. But I didn't answer. I was already gone. Ansel had arranged my escape the night before. I left the house through the old servant tunnel beneath the rose garden. The same one my mother used to walk through when she wanted to smell the flowers without being seen. I went straight to the palace. Not as a guest. Not as a petitioner. But as Elira Dorn. When I arrived, the guards bowed. Not deeply. But enough. I stood in the court antechamber in a borrowed gown, my hair brushed out, the mark of the attic still faintly etched beneath my eyes. I didn't try to hide who I'd been. And then the door opened. Prince Thorian stood there. No crown. No mask. Just a man looking at a woman he had already chosen, long before he knew her name. He walked toward me and said softly, "I knew it." I waited. "You danced like her. Spoke like her." But I didn't believe it until now. I lifted my chin. "And now?" He smiled. "Now I wonder what took you so long." The palace moved swiftly after that. Once the royal archivist verified my father's documents, Lady Rowena's guardianship was declared void. An official notice was sent to Dorne Manor, informing her that the estate and all its assets were being seized for investigation. The royal court would decide whether to return them to me in full, or charge her with mismanagement and fraud. It was a victory. But it wasn't the end. Because Clarisse was still spinning her web. 3 days after Lady Rowena's departure from court, another royal masquerade was announced, smaller, more exclusive. The Queen had insisted on it, believing a more refined setting would help Prince Thorian finalize his decision. Clarisse managed to secure an invitation. I wasn't surprised. But I wasn't afraid either. I watched from the palace balcony as carriages arrived and music floated through the halls. This time I didn't enter wearing a disguise. I stood back, in shadows, in silence. Letting them talk. Letting her perform. Clarisse wore a third silver gown, more elaborate than the last. Jewels sewn into the sleeves, a mask laced with diamond dust. She made her entrance like a queen. And the court gave her their attention. She found Thorian within minutes, forced herself into his conversation, laughed too loudly, touched his arm too often. He remained polite. But his eyes never lingered on her. When the waltz began, Clarisse moved to take his hand. He stepped back. "I'm waiting for someone," he said. She blinked. "I'm right here." "No," he said. "You're not." Then he walked away. The rejection wasn't private. And Clarisse knew it. I turned before she could spot me watching. I didn't want her fury tonight. I wanted her silence. Later, Thorian found me in the palace garden, away from the crowd. "You were watching," he said. "I was curious how long you'd let her talk." He grinned. "She talks a lot. She lies more. Most people do." I looked at him, studying the lines of his face. "Do you?" "Not to you." There was a pause. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in velvet. A mask. Not mine. But one made for me. Simple. Midnight blue, trimmed with silver. Like the night we met. He held it out. "You left yours behind. I thought you might want to choose whether you ever wear one again." I didn't take it. "I don't need it anymore." He nodded and put it away. "Good. Because the council's meeting tomorrow. And your name will be on the list." "For what?" "For consideration. As my future queen." I froze. He wasn't asking. He was telling me what the world was already preparing for. "I'm not ready," I said. "You're more ready than anyone I've ever met." "And what if I don't want to be queen?" "Then don't," he said. "But don't let them decide for you. Not your stepmother. Not the court. Not me." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the guest chamber overlooking the moonlit hills of the kingdom I might one day rule. Not because I wanted power. But because I had been told my whole life that I was nothing. And now, I had a chance to become something on my own terms. Clarisse came to my room just before dawn. She didn't knock. She stood in the doorway, eyes rimmed with tears and rage. "I should have been chosen," she hissed. "You stole everything. My gowns. My night. My future." I stood. "You were given everything. I made mine from scraps." She laughed bitterly. "You think they'll accept you? A servant girl playing noble?" "I don't care if they do," I said. "I don't need their permission. And I certainly don't need yours." Her expression twisted into something hateful. "You think you've won?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm still rising." Then I called for the guards. Clarisse was escorted out of the palace. She screamed, threatened, even sobbed for her mother. But Lady Rowena was already being held under house arrest. And I was just getting started. Lady Rowena's arrest became the talk of the kingdom. The court was divided. Some claimed she was a grieving widow, misunderstood. Others whispered that she had embezzled funds from the Dorne estate and falsified Illyria's status to keep the fortune under her control. The more the investigation revealed, the clearer the truth became. Lady Rowena hadn't just stolen a title. She'd stolen a life. The scandal grew so loud, even the king was forced to address it in public. But Clarisse wouldn't go quietly. A week after her removal from the palace, she re-emerged in court with a letter signed by a minor count from a distant province. The letter claimed that he had seen Clarice leaving the ball on the prince's arm. That she had been the one in the silver gown. That the prince had confided in him privately, naming her as his choice. It was laughable. But the court didn't laugh. Because in politics, lies only need to be believable enough to stall the truth. The royal council demanded clarity. A formal questioning was arranged. Clarice was brought into the great hall again, flanked by her mother's allies. She wore black this time, no mask, no glitter. Just tears and trembling hands. She played the part of the wronged woman so well, I almost believed her for a second. Until she started talking. I loved him, she said to the council. I was afraid. That's why I didn't speak sooner. I didn't want to seem like I was seeking attention. But I can't stay silent while she, her eyes flicked to me, continues pretending to be someone she's not. Clarice, the queen said coolly, are you accusing Elira Dorn of impersonation? I'm saying she's clever. Ambitious. That she used the mystery of the masquerade to insert herself into His Highness's affections. And what of the dress? Another councilwoman asked. The silver gown you wore. Was it your first? Clarice hesitated. Just for a moment. That was all I needed. I stood. With the council's permission, I would like to present a witness. They allowed it. The doors opened, and the old seamstress stepped in, small, wrinkled, and shaking from nerves. She bowed low. My lords and ladies, I was the one who altered a gown for the Lady Elira. Weeks before the masquerade. She unwrapped a bundle from her hands. The original dress. Torn, burned, stained with soot, but still intact. Midnight blue, with the silver embroidery unmistakable. I stitched every thread myself, she said. She brought me scraps and pearls wrapped in parchment. I recognized it the night of the ball. I knew she was the one. Clarice surged to her feet. That proves nothing. She's just a servant. As was I said quietly. For 3 years, I was a servant under your roof. And you knew who I was. You knew the truth about my inheritance, my name, my title. You locked me in the attic to keep me quiet. You starved me. Struck me. Lied to the court. Lied to your own daughter. The room fell silent. Clarice stared at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. That made 2 of us. Prince Thorian stepped forward. He didn't speak. Just took my hand in front of the entire court. And suddenly, the lie was too loud to ignore. The queen rose slowly. It appears, she said, voice sharp as glass, that the masked girl was never hidden. Only buried. And now, she has risen. Clarice made one last attempt. I'm not a liar, she whispered. I was just afraid. Then let fear be your lesson, the queen said. Clarice was stripped of her noble privileges that same day. Her titles rescinded. She and Lady Rowena were exiled to a distant province, forbidden from stepping foot in court again without royal permission. No one fought for them. Not even their former allies. Their name had become poison. That night, I stood at the window of the guest chambers, looking down at the glowing city below. The prince entered quietly, no guards, no ceremony. He held up the velvet bundle again. The mask. I took it this time. And I placed it gently on the table. Let it rest, I said. It's done its part. Thorian looked at me. And what part will you play now? I met his gaze. The one I was born for. It took weeks to clean up the damage Lady Rowena left behind. The estate's ledgers were in shambles. Contracts had been forged. Land had been illegally leased. Staff wages were missing, some for years. And while the court no longer questioned my legitimacy, they now looked to me for responsibility. I had inherited not only my father's name, but the mess left in his absence. But I wasn't the girl who sewed a gown in secret anymore. I faced the inquiries head-on. I worked with the royal accountants myself, returning every stolen coin I could find. I rehired the staff Rowena had dismissed. I invited back the steward she'd fired for speaking too freely. The people of my house, once beaten into silence, now looked at me with hope instead of pity. And through it all, Prince Thorian never once tried to take over. He watched. Supported. Advised when I asked. But he never told me what to do. It unsettled the court. They were used to women being ornamental. They didn't know what to make of one who could sign her own name and command a room. There were whispers. Saying I was too forward, too cold, too bold. But it was never the servants or common folk who said it. It was always the women who'd spent their lives smiling while their power was taken from them. Let them whisper. The ballads they'd write later wouldn't be about the ones who obeyed. One afternoon, during council, a message arrived at the palace. A formal petition from Clarice. She was appealing her exile, citing her emotional distress and influence from an overbearing mother. She begged for leniency and requested an audience. The queen crumpled the letter without reading it aloud. Thorian didn't even look up. I stared out the window, half expecting to feel something. Pity, maybe. Or even satisfaction. But there was only calm. Because Clarice still believed this was about getting back what she lost. She hadn't realized yet, she never had it to begin with. She thought wearing my dress would make her me. She thought saying the right lines would earn love. But the prince had seen her in daylight, without glitter and shadow. And what he saw wasn't enough. Because love can't be stolen. It has to be earned. And mine had been. Days later, the queen summoned me privately. She handed me a scroll sealed with gold wax and smiled. It's done, she said. The proclamation was official. My title was restored in full. Lady Alira Dorn, sole heir to House Dorn, recognized ward of the crown, and candidate for royal engagement. It was done. But that night. Dorn's phoenix. Not a proposal, he said, placing it in my palm. A promise. I stared at it. I don't need a queen who'll bow, he said. I need one who'll rise. I didn't cry. I didn't blush. I smiled. I've already risen, I said. Now watch me soar. The royal wedding was not a grand affair. That was my choice. No sea of nobles, no circus of gowns and pearls. Just the people who mattered. Those who stood beside me when I had nothing, Ansel, the seamstress, the steward I'd reinstated. Thorian insisted it be held in the palace gardens, the very place where he first realized who I was. I wore a dress I chose myself, stitched with the Dorn crest over my heart, and a crown that didn't weigh as much as I feared it would. The kingdom rejoiced. They loved a fairy tale. But ours wasn't one of magic. It was one of fire. Because even as I stood at the altar, hand in Thorian's, I knew this wasn't the end of my rise. It was just the next step. The queen passed me the ceremonial scroll. The moment I signed it, I became not just a wife, but a sovereign. Equal in power. Voice in council. A name no one could erase again. The nobles who once laughed behind fans now bowed before me. The courtiers who sneered at my common past now sought my favor. And Clarice? She didn't attend. But I heard the rumors. She had taken to pretending she never wanted the crown. That she'd been relieved not to be married to a man who clearly favored peasants. She clung to whatever scraps of attention she could get, even as her mother sat under house arrest, stripped of her title and wealth, a ghost in a crumbling villa. She sent one last letter. It arrived a week after the wedding. A single page. I forgive you, she wrote. I hope one day you can forgive me too. I burned it. Not out of anger. But because I didn't need her forgiveness. And I certainly didn't owe her mine. My story had never been hers to ruin. I spent the following months rebuilding Dorn House. Not just the estate, but the name. I established schools for girls in nearby villages, funded apprenticeship programs, and opened a center for servants wronged by their masters. I used Rowena's stolen accounts to fund every brick. That was how I got revenge. Not through fire and fury, but by thriving in a world that tried to bury me. Thorian stood by me every step. He never tried to tame me. Never asked me to smile when I didn't want to. He didn't fall in love with a mystery. He fell in love with the girl behind it. And now he ruled beside a queen who had earned her crown, stitch by stitch. Sometimes, I walked the halls of the palace alone at night, barefoot, cloak draped over my shoulders. I'd pass the ballroom where we danced that first night and pause at the edge of the marble floor. I'd close my eyes and remember what it felt like to be invisible. Then I'd open them and remember what it feels like now, to be seen. To be chosen. Not for a mask. But for everything I am. They once called me a servant girl. Now? They call me High Lady Alira Dorn. Masked for a night. Loved for who I am. And never forgotten again.